Hello and welcome to Business Talk, brought to you by the Sharonville Chamber of Commerce. I'm Britt Scarce with Emory Federal Credit Union, and here in studio today we have Karl Ulrich with Sebaly, Shillito Dyer, and Pandy Pridemore from the Human Resource USA, and we're going to be talking about dress codes and other HR issues. Karl, Pandy?
Hello, Britt.
Welcome to the show. So, what does it matter what I wear to work? Do I need a dress code?
How many times have you walked into an establishment and suddenly realized, I can't really tell the customers or from the people who work here?
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to show my age, but when I started, not my first job, but my first real job, we still called everybody by Mr. and Mrs. Everyone still wore a suit and tie. And it was a retail establishment. It was a different world to what we have today.
Yeah.
So is there any etched in stone type law that says we have to have a dress code? Actually, that's a little gray because in some situations we do have to have a dress code.
Okay.
So that's what we're going to talk about today is how do we differentiate and on what basis of standards do we actually start thinking about a dress code?
So who should determine this dress code at a company?
Well, guess what? Sometimes the company doesn't necessarily get to choose.
Okay.
So let's talk about why you would want to have a dress code. Let's start with there. And we'll start with safety.
Okay.
OSHA is going to tell you what needs to be involved if there are issues where PPE are required.
Okay.
And that might be food service, that might be a plastics manufacturer, but steel-toe shoes, Chemtech jumpwear, latex gloves, all can be considered part of a dress code.
Yeah.
Whether they wear hairnets, whether there's allowed jewelry. See, sometimes it's not the company gets to decide.
I'm seeing gentlemen with beards wearing these beard guards at food service companies.
Well, they certainly wouldn't be able to wear a respirator in a hazmat facility because that would all go away. So that would be a part of the dress code there.
Okay.
Look, the most easy one, that we go down the list. Safety is one of the first things we have to consider.
Okay.
Do we need a dress code? What about the image and the culture for the company? What message do we want to send? If you go to your doctor, do you really want your doctor assistant or the nurses to have certain apparel or have certain appearances? I mean, take it into consideration. What about the morale? Companies need to be really, really careful about the morale.
Yeah.
Privacy issues with an employee. Do we really want to put the full name of the individual on a uniform?
Okay.
Maybe
I would not have thought about that.
Well, and that's where you really kind of have to kind of go down the list to see if a dress code is appropriate and then decide what needs to go into that dress code.
Okay. So are there any legal issues, Karl, we have to worry about with regard to dress codes? I mean, if I'm...
Get ready, lean back and relax.
Well,
just
if I'm a business owner that I'm just kind of old school and stuffy and I just want to, I want everybody to dress like, Ward Cleaver or something like that, I mean, can I demand that or what do we have to worry about there?
Well, like any policy, you have to identify what your culture is, you have to define that, and you have to design a dress code around it. And Pandy already talked about some of the legal issues associated with safety and with foodborne illnesses, those kinds of things. And so you need to be sure you understand the regulatory context for your business, number one, and also your culture. And from my perspective, though, consistent enforcement then is the next level. This is really the same issue you have with all kinds of employment policies. If you have a handbook with policies in it, you need to make sure that the folks that are enforcing that policy on a day-to-day basis, the folks who are interacting with the workers out on the shop floor or the people in the office, are the ones who are enforcing it consistently. They're not applying one standard to one person, another standard to another person. So you have to be sure that that's the case. Because inconsistent enforcement can lead to all kinds of issues of discrimination and wrongful discharge and all kinds of other potential legal risks. The other concerns are a little more difficult to define because they are more situational. But you may, for example, have a perfectly fine, across-the-board, one-size-fits-all dress code that applies to everybody you're interviewing and everybody who works in the facility. But that doesn't necessarily take into account certain, let's say, religious practices. There's a famous case out of Oklahoma involving a retailer where somebody, a Muslim woman, came in with a hijab and was interviewed for a job, and because of the so-called look policy, a particular look that the institution wanted to have in its associates, they didn't allow any kind of head covering. And so this was obviously a tenet of her religion. She was disqualified on the basis of that head covering. That case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, in a very resounding, fairly well-reasoned opinion, I thought, came out in favor of the young woman who applied there, and found that the employer had discriminated on the basis of religion, even though they were applying a facially neutral dress code.
Yeah.
So again, there are certain considerations to take into account when you design a dress code around religion, around ethnicity, around disabilities. There may be certain dress code requirements that interfere with a disabled individual's ability to do the job. So there are certain aspects of how you apply that code that have to be taken into account in certain situations as well.
Well, let's.
Now, sorry.
No, I just get all excited because this is stuff that we just don't talk about normally.
Right.
But there are three things that they really need to think about before they start really pinning down to avoid those kind of things. And the first is justification. Mm-hmm. Can they put a business justification behind saying, you know, they have to wear high-heeled shoes versus tennis shoes, or
Not just that me as the boss or the owner, I just like the way people look when they dress like that.
exactly.
I just prefer that.
Exactly.
There's a hot button, I think, right now. What about people with piercings and tattoos and that sort of thing with dress codes? So if you wear, short sleeves and you happen to have full sleeve tattoos, is that something that could cause an issue legally or with breaking, rules at the company?
Well, the real issue here is whether that expression is somehow related to ethnicity or religion or some kind of expression of protected status. That then rises to the level of a Title VII problem. So if you deny someone employment because they have piercings, but the piercings happen to be an expression of their religious beliefs, a bona fide expression of their religious beliefs. I don't know that there's a religion out there that does that, but let's just assume that's the case. Then you could have a Title VII problem. But ordinarily those kinds of things, those kinds of standards are not an issue. But you do have to be sensitive to accommodations in certain contexts. And Pandy's right. One of the things you also, I think, want to do is when you design a dress code policy, you want to be sure that the requirements that you're putting into that policy are bona fide, are occupational requirements of the position. That they're not just conjured up because of somebody's particular predilection for a type of dress or a type of shoe. They need to be real qualifications. They need to be tied to culture, which is why we talked to that earlier, and they need to be tied to some other real requirement in the workplace.
Okay. Are there any issues with just not having one?
Not having
Not
a dress
having
code?
a dress code. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, is anybody? Absolutely. Again, it's how much time do you want to spend on something like this? When we say that, we think, oh, everybody's just going to do the right thing all the time.
Right.
And that never happens because your right might be his wrong. And let's take that one step further. When you're writing that dress code policy, remember that if you put the words in appropriate or
what's inappropriate to him might not be
Exactly.
inappropriate to me. I mean, I might
Exactly.
like really short shorts that I like to wear.
Mid-length.
And I think they look great.
I'm trying to
but,
think of some of the really general terms. Mid-length, short.
Yeah.
It's a real disturbing image there.
Yeah, I know. It's like, I'm just thinking of, places that I've worked before.
Sure.
And some people's idea of what was appropriate to wear at work. Yeah. If you were to poll 99 people, probably 99 people, or 100 people, 99 of them would have said that's probably not appropriate.
Well, here's a good example, and I know you've dealt with this. A client who says, okay, leggings are fine. It's the style, we get it, the pencil pant.
Yeah.
And you have one particular body shape that looks really good in them, and then you have another body shape that looks entirely different in them. But the dress code says that they're okay. getting back to Carl's point, you have to do what your policy says. Now, ponytails with women, long hair ponytails. Okay, you can say, yeah, she can wear a ponytail, but can you restrict him from having the long hair and ponytail? What's your policy say?
Right.
And can you restrict it? Yeah, should you have a policy? Actually, I say yes. Mm-hmm. I say absolutely yes. At least help the candidate as you're interviewing them understand who you are and what type of a company you are trying to be for your clients and customers. Mm-hmm. An HVAC company may require uniforms, and an individual deviating from that uniform, not tucking his shirt in, not wearing a belt. If he doesn't understand that, then yeah, we may have some concerns. But
and that could be a safety issue because loose clothing. If you work at a particular factory that has moving machinery that can get caught. I know some people cannot wear rings, and obviously wedding rings. Most people like to wear their wedding ring, but if you work around equipment, it's probably not a good idea. I mean, it could catch your finger and tear your finger off.
Absolutely. Now, one of the questions that sometimes comes up is, can I ask that individual to provide proof that their religion or their choice of reason for not wanting to do this is valid? And you can, but you got to accept the fact you can't stand there and judge whether that church is real or not.
Right.
I mean,
well, and in this day and age, I mean, can't anything be in a religion? I mean,
well, not really.
It seems like anything goes anymore.
There are lots of different religions that most of us have never heard about that qualify as religions. Yeah. So you do have to be sensitive to that issue. I mean, getting back to your earlier question, do you need a policy? When I see people talking about dress code policies for the first time, it's usually right after somebody has first appeared in the workplace with something that someone considered inappropriate. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's when the reality meets the expectation that you begin to have issues, and without a policy in place, you have no basis of enforcement. It's not as easy to go to that individual and say, well, this doesn't work in the workplace. That person could say, well, I didn't know that. You can't discipline me because you never told me what was and wasn't appropriate. I mean, the whole thing about employment policies is about managing your employees' expectations. It's also, to some extent, managing your supervisor's enforcement activities, but it's even more important to manage your employees' expectations ahead of the need to enforce. And so I think a dress code is a perfect example of that. And as I said, you don't typically see you don't see those policies become talked about until somebody actually arrives in an outfit that doesn't work.
Yeah. So bottom line is, it's a pretty good idea to have some sort of, dress code policy, and make it consistent and enforce it, equally to everyone, and it kind of keeps you out of trouble.
Well, and to remember that casual days are a benefit, not a right. I just have to throw that in, being old-fashioned.
It's
jeans are not always a staple to the dress code. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, great information. Karl, Pandy, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us about this.
Thank you.
This is something that I think a lot of people in the workplace, have to deal with every day. So I think there's some real meat here that hopefully everybody will get a lot of, good use out of.
Good. Thank you.
You've been watching Business Talk. I'm Britt Scarce with Emory Federal Credit Union. Till next time.